All right, we're live. Yes, we are. Hey, folks, good evening. Welcome to a special town hall with all 5 of the Board of Education candidates for South Orange-Maplewood School District. I'm Pete Paschal. I'm one of the leaders of SOMA for a Sensible Refocus on Students, or SOMA SRS for short. It's a group that was formed during the pandemic and advocated for the safe reopening of SOMA schools. And now we advocate for decision-making that puts students and their experiences first. Every candidate in this town hall is allowed a 1-minute opening to introduce themselves and explain why they're running. The town hall will consist of 5 questions, which we sourced from our membership and edited with our leadership team. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and there will be no time allotted for rebuttals. The order of answers has been determined randomly. For the second question, so for the second question, the second person in that order will start, and then the third person will start, and so on and so on. At the end of the event, each candidate will be given 1 minute to make closing remarks. And we're also recording this town hall on YouTube, and it will be available publicly afterward, assuming the streaming gods smile upon us. We're actually using a new platform tonight, but it seems to be working really well. And a recording should be available on YouTube shortly after we wrap up. So we know everyone is pressed for time. We're going to start with some introductions. And we did a coin flip at the beginning, right before we went live, to determine which slate would lead in closing statements. So for now, right now, I would like to welcome the slate of Jeff Bennett and Tony Mazzocchi. Guys, why don't you state your introductions?
Jeff, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Jeff Bennett. I've lived here for 17 years. I've been a board watcher for 12 years. I've been a parent. You might have caught that I was elected to the Board of Ed in 2012 when I was age 22, before I had my own children. I think I was the youngest board member here in a generation. I now have 3 kids. I have a 5th grader, a 2nd grader, and a little daughter in public pre-K. My wife is also a public school principal. When I was elected to the board the first time, I was the youngest board member here. I didn't have my own kids. I knew a good amount about education at the time, but I didn't have the lived experience with the schools that only district parents have. Something I'm proud of from my time on the board the first time is that I was the primary author of the Access and Equity Policy, which made advanced classes open access. After my board term, I was research director of a small organization called the Fair Funding Action Committee that successfully got New Jersey state aid law changed. Our work has brought the SOMSD almost $2 million more than we would have gotten otherwise. We all have a lot of big hopes for the district, and we can't realize that without a sufficient budget.
And that's time. Thanks, Jeff. Tony, why don't you have the floor? Oh, Tony, can you unmute yourself? I got you. You got.
I think you muted me. Yeah. We good?
We're good. You go.
All right. Hi, everybody. Tony Mazzocchi, graduate of our SOMSD schools, former supervisor of fine and performing arts in the district, former BOE member from 2018 through 2020, and currently I'm a member of the upper administrative team at Montclair State University, where I direct the School of Music. I'm also a parent of 2 children in district. I've said this before, we should thank 3 candidates for stepping up to run for Board of Ed this year. When I heard these 3 were running unopposed as a slate, I was very interested to engage, as I always do, in a larger public conversation about all the issues facing our schools. I waited, and after waiting some more, by the first week of October, I wasn't satisfied the community was hearing enough of that conversation. I believe in contested elections. I believe in an open sharing of ideas through debate, even when it's uncomfortable, and I believe the community deserves to hear multiple points of view during this crucial time in our schools. That's why I decided to run as a write-in candidate this year for Board of Ed, joined by Jeff.
And that's time.
And I'm glad we'll be having this conversation together this evening. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. And we'll flip it to the other slate. Why don't we start with you, Liz? Oh, I got to unmute you. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, you're good.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you so much to the leadership team of SOMA Sensible Refocus on Students for hosting tonight's forum. Thank you to everyone in the community who was able to join tonight. And thank you to the full slate of candidates, both the folks I'm running with, as well as Tony and Jeff for being here tonight. I am Liz Callahan. I am a Maplewood resident. I'm a proud mom of 2 kids in our district, a volunteer in our schools, and also an educator with just shy of 2 decades of experience. I have watched and participated in board meetings as a community member, and my decision to run for the board was connected to my values around compassion, community, and curiosity. As a candidate and potential board member, this role to me feels like putting those values into committed action. I ultimately made the decision to run because we are, as was already said, at a really critical juncture in our community, in our district, and we have a lot of plates spinning. And much of what I do professionally is connected to the very things and issues that we're grappling with, such as disparities in discipline, reducing disproportionality in special education, and creating more thoughtful programs to serve neurodivergent students, as well as developing plans to address issues concerning culture and climate.
Good stuff. Thanks, Liz. Going alphabetically, Will, why don't you go ahead?
Great, thanks. Good evening. Thanks so much to SOMA SRS for hosting the forum. I'm running for Board of Education because I believe in our district's potential to be excellent for every one of our kids. And I believe we could have a board that works collaboratively, responsibly, and competently in service of that mission. I am so proud to be running with Shana and Liz, both of whom are talented educators and community volunteers. We need board members like them who've worked on the ground in education, especially come January. Their experience, along with my own as a longtime advocate for students with special needs, can steer us in a better direction. We filed for the Board of Education by the July deadline. We've also filed our campaign finance paperwork. We've been out campaigning for months now, sitting down with families, community leaders, teachers, and administrators, and talking about our district's operational flaws and persistent inequities. And the one thing we hear so often is how they're sick of BOE business as usual. We need new board leadership to fix our old problems, and that's what we hope to deliver. Thank you.
Perfectly timed. Shana, oh, you're unmuted. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having us. I am Shana Sackett-Gable, and I'm running for a seat on our Board of Ed along with Liz Callahan and Will Meyer. I decided to run for school board because I believe every student deserves an exceptional education. My lived experience in our towns, along with my professional knowledge and commitment to service in our schools, would add to the diversity of perspectives that we need on the Board of Ed. South Orange is my hometown. I went to Jefferson, now Bolden School, South Orange Middle School, and I graduated from CHS. I taught at Seth Boyden for over a decade. I've been an active parent volunteer in SOMSD, and in these roles, I've worked with our district's leadership, listened to parents from all schools, and while we haven't always agreed, I've maintained a collaborative spirit with a temperament that moved us forward. I decided to raise my children here, and my commitment to service proves that I will show up time and time again for all of our kids. With Liz and Will, if elected, I'm excited to advocate for policies to give our students the education they deserve.
Excellent. Also well timed. Thank you, everyone. All right, we're going to get right to the questions. So as I said at the beginning, every candidate will have 2 minutes for each question. And the order is we are going to start. Will has won the lottery of who goes first. And we're going to go from Will to Tony to Jeff to Liz to Shana. And as I said, every question will advance that one spot. So for the second question, Tony will start. For the third question, Jeff will start, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So first question, Will, you're up first. Here it is. If asked to vote to renew Dr. Taylor's contract today, based on all the information available to you, would you vote to renew? A yes or no answer is required, but feel free to add context.
All right, thanks. Look, I'm going to be honest. It would make my life in this campaign so much easier if I showed up tonight and said, let's fire Dr. Taylor. Because it's a great soundbite. It's cathartic to say. And there's a whole lot of vocal members of our community, including our teachers union, who seem to be saying they want this to happen. And to be clear, there's a lot of folks who have very real grievances against our district and the way it's being run right now, which we've all heard. But I'm not going to use his career as a campaign promise because I wouldn't vote for somebody who did. It may well be at the end of the day that we shouldn't renew the superintendent, but this is a deliberative process. It deserves serious-minded professionals with backgrounds in education, preferably, who are going to do their due diligence. I wouldn't vote to non-renew a teacher even faced with an hour of public speaks against them, without giving them an opportunity to defend themselves and review their internal performance records. That's what I'm committing to do tonight. Not a yes, not a no, due diligence. The superintendent must immediately be evaluated in January, including a review of all his prior performance reviews. And he'll be asked by me and by the board to account for and defend against the frustrations and charges levied against him. And then from there, we build consensus on the board and we make the decision we have to make. Now, regardless of who the superintendent is come July, it's imperative that we have trustworthy, competent, level-headed, and informed folks on the board to supervise that person, guide them, hold them accountable, especially people who have the educational background to make sure that their ideas and proposals are passing the sniff test. That's not going to happen if we continue the BOE dysfunction of the past. It's time to move forward with folks, not the folks who chose Taylor in the first place, not the folks who voted in John Ramos, someone new, folks who have the experience. Thank you.
All right, moving on to Tony. What is your answer? And let me know if you'd like me to repeat the question.
No, I heard the question loud and clear, and I'm glad to hear that Will Myers changed his mind about this way he would go about this process. Only a few months ago, he actually went to the board in public and asked them to renew Dr. Taylor, not even as a member of the board, which was a misinformed opinion. So the fact he's changed his mind, we're getting there. Mine is a little more informed. I'm unique in this race in that, look, I was a member of the search committee for Dr. Taylor. I did foundational work with the board to clear the deck, to have this leadership team open for him to choose on their own. Superintendents don't get that in 2 lifetimes. We allowed him to adjust his organizational chart. We allowed him to increase administrative positions to suit his vision, whatever that was for the district. Our fiscal house was in order. The initiatives were off to the races, which I voted on between the III and the LRFP. It was his to manage and lead. I oversaw his work. I played a big role in evaluating for 1.5 years. So I have a different opinion. I've lost confidence. I don't think we should be scared to find somebody new. I work in education. 5 years of a leader is plenty to see what somebody is all about from the inside and the outside. I think we can thank him for his service. I can think we celebrate how we've retained a super beyond the state average of 3.5 years. And we need to understand we can do better because we must do better. Anybody saw this past Wednesday's meeting knows that the point of diminishing returns is past. So absolutely, I want to be very, very clear. We need to move on, thank him for his service, and go to search for a new superintendent.
All right, very clear. Jeff, it is your turn.
My hope is that the superintendent resigns. I thought we've needed new leadership since 2022. Unfortunately, Dr. Taylor has made way too many mistakes in too many areas across policy design, communication, implementation, litigation exposure, personnel, and sensitivity in tough moments. It's having a big negative impact on our students, parents, and teachers. Every month brings new bad news. We knew about the busing fiasco. Now we hear that freshman academy at CHS is a mess too. When the superintendent came here, I liked him. I thought he was very gracious and very good at responding to email. But then major things went wrong. Nobody could plan for COVID, but we were the last suburban district to reopen, in part because of the air filters not being installed. And there were so many demoralizing false starts. Our students' learning loss was worse than the state average, and our enrollment loss was 8%, which was triple the state average. Dr. Taylor is also not good with accepting help and offering information. We've heard from the Black Parents Workshop that he resisted working with Dr. Fergus and didn't provide necessary information at first. The integration plan, the major issue primarily of his design, has gone badly. In the late 2010s, there was so much goodwill towards an integration plan, but it never occurred to anyone that we would have this anomalous, hardline system where families have absolutely zero role in placement, and that distantly placed kids wouldn't be bused. I think Dr. Taylor's explanation of the III, where he used terms like proximity weight, Berkeley model, and micro neighborhoods, gave everyone a false start of how the system would work. Now we do have busing for distantly placed elementary schoolers, which is good, but kids are lucky if their bus is only 5 minutes late. Some buses are chronically 20 minutes late or an hour late on a bad day. Kids are also on buses for almost an hour, and some get picked up at 7 a.m., forcing them into sleep deprivation. This is wrong, and Dr. Taylor has failed in blaming it all on bus tiering or the bus companies. I'm a nice guy. I don't like saying this. I know that some of the mistakes are due to the BOE or due to certain situations beyond anyone's control. But if I'm elected and there isn't a resignation, I have to be honest and say, assuming there's nothing totally like redeeming in his personnel file, I would have to vote against renewal.
Great. Yeah, I think I'll start by saying that I appreciate Tony saying that we're allowed as a community to give each other grace to change our mind, knowing that he's obviously seen enough to have changed his mind from his initial decision, and now Will has made some strides there too. So I think what we have ultimately in front of us are really two issues, right? The first is, and I won't enumerate them, but the litany of mistakes and missteps that have been not just ongoing, but that really culminated in this most recent Board of Education meeting. We had multiple stakeholders, parents, teachers, who rattled off the many areas where leadership has fallen short. And in fact, we had candidates join in that as well. However, my goal as a candidate and a potential board member is to listen and take those things into account, into consideration, but to take the temperature down and operate from a place of more thoughtful, intentional decision-making. It's grounded on multiple sources of information, which brings me right into the second issue, which is good governance. We have been plagued over and over again with boards that are dysfunctional, argumentative, with low adherence to procedure. We have an opportunity to change the tenor of this in this election and not invite back board members who will grandstand and engage in sweeping proclamations. A strained relationship between our board and our superintendent was also on full display in the last board meeting. So I am also super curious about what the current board members think. And if elected, I look forward to developing an understanding of why steps weren't already taken around non-renewal, what we know based on the public vantage point. And if elected, I am fully committed to the process. I would come to the table with the information that's already available to us all publicly. I'm open to listening to my board colleagues' perspectives, and I'm eager to review that non-public information. However, at this point, it would take a whole lot to convince me that we're on the right path with our current superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you. Shayna, go ahead. Sorry, I think we're both trying to unmute you at the same time. Okay. You can go for it. You got it now.
So the Board of Ed has one employee, and their leadership over our school district is crucial to the success of our students. And this is not to be taken lightly. And there are a couple of things that I'd like to also bring up. Over the past few weeks, talking to neighbors and of course, listening at the recent Board of Ed meeting, I heard the loud outcries from parents and teachers about the list long operational issues and fiascos that deserve to be weighed heavily when the board decides on the super's tenure. And this is directly connected to strong board governance. Our board has had tons of dysfunction. How did the past boards slip into these food fights? By coming to the table with their minds made up on critical issues and being unwilling to listen and collaboratively build consensus. I'm committed to coming in ready to deliberate with board colleagues. After all, the current board must have non-public insight into why they have chosen to continue with Dr. Taylor as superintendent. I want to hear that information. I want to see the documentation behind it. And if the board does decide that it's time for a new district leader, we would need to be proactive so we can buffer the edges of a potentially sharp transition. I would be in a unique position to provide oversight of such a transition because I know what superintendent turnover feels like from the field. I worked here under Memoli, Osborne, Ramos, Ficara, and each one had a combination of their own ideas, senior leadership team members, and mandates for the staff to follow. Our district has a lot going on. We need to make the transition as smooth as possible. And the board needs to work together on decisions, especially of this magnitude. Board dysfunction leads to district instability. This would not be a time to bypass the collaborative process.
Cool, in time. Thank you. All right, thanks everyone for those questions. Moving on to the second question. What are your views on de-leveling generally? Please explain what you view as the pros and cons of such a policy and what considerations, if any, would be required of such a policy for you to vote for it. We're going to start this one with Tony.
And you have 2 minutes. Well, you know, look, we need to, first of all, the community needs to understand what we have right now in the schools. We have de-leveled K through 8 almost entirely, with the exception of math. And as I pointed out the other night, chorus, and at the high school. I think we have a lot of disagreement in these towns about this, what I believe is a false binary, that levels equal bad and evil and no levels equal virtuous and good. It's a far more complicated than that. But I'm just going to talk about the policy that was presented at hand the other night, which was a 7-page long document that we were told was fully baked, that sought to get rid of all levels at the high school and, of course, the middle school. That's bananas, absolutely bananas, especially when done the way it was being proposed. In other words, a policy with really no explanation or plans on how to accomplish it, while the superintendent showed, at least me, that I really don't believe he knows how. As I said in public, that equates to educational malpractice. By the way, Dr. Taylor brought this policy up for first read against the wishes of the majority of the board, as we saw later in the vote and as we heard, and said something that was quite extraordinary, that he didn't need their vote anyway to move forward. Let me be clear to everybody, that is patently false. The board approves the budget, curriculum, finances, etc. I really couldn't believe what I heard. That's some very dangerous language. So you want to know what accountability looks like? If I were on the BOE with Grace, the next day I would have insisted upon a letter of reprimand for the super's file with a prescribed action plan for the rest of his term. Because yes, we can talk about board dysfunction. That's administrative dysfunction too. And the combination is really unhealthy, as we saw on Wednesday night.
Thank you, Tony. Jeff, your answer. Oh, 1 second. Let me unmute you. 1 second. You go for it.
So our district has huge problems with unequal academic achievement. We've had that for a long time. We have a 30-point internal achievement gap between white and black students. And if you do an inter-district comparison, black and low-income students here do worse than in almost any other nearby suburb. Yet I don't think total de-leveling below AP is the answer. What I'm for is for open access to advanced courses with supports, but not necessarily requiring students to take courses they don't feel they're ready for or isn't consistent with their future plans. I'm particularly concerned about totally de-leveling math. Math at the middle school level is complex enough, and student readiness is wide enough that having fully heterogeneous classes would never let teachers be at their most effective. It wouldn't let teachers give certain kids extra help. It wouldn't let them accelerate other kids. De-leveling middle school math would imply that no 8th grader gets to take geometry, which is taking opportunity away from a child. It would also mean that all 8th graders take algebra, which districts with high-performing black and low-income students don't attempt. For many students, 9th grade is still the right year to take algebra. High schoolers also deserve control over their academic pathways. They're more mature by then. I think it's kind of arrogant to assume that a BOE or superintendent always knows what's best for older children. High schoolers, including in non-math subjects, also do more complex work, and teachers can't be maximally effective at challenging the most advanced students or offering extra help to students who might be a bit behind the advanced ones. We can't accept the status quo of unequal outcomes. We need a solid elementary school reading program, which is something I advocated for in my first board term. I was always against the Readers and Writers Workshop as lacking phonics instruction and lacking coherent build of knowledge. We need to teach elementary schoolers more science, geography, and history in a coherent way. We need to promote and expand our step-up programs and in-person tutoring. We need to embrace a growth mindset. We need to diversify our teacher corps. We need culturally competent teaching. We need to improve special education. But total de-leveling below...
Thanks, Jeff. Liz, your answer, please.
Absolutely. So let me start by being perfectly clear. I do not think de-leveling is a good idea for our district now or in the near future. We know, as Tony stated, that the work has been done to remove some extraneous levels from the middle and high school course options, yet academic segregation and outcomes persist across our district. So engaging in transparent yearly reviews of honors, AP, enrollment, race, gender, special education, English language is all super critical to ensuring we're moving the needle in our academic levels. Also, the report that Dr. Fergus has outlined is an incredible amount of work. As an educator looking at it, we have truly so much work ahead of us to execute on in the next 3 years. And I'm cognizant of that as a potential board member. Our district has long struggled, though, with where the rubber meets the road from policy to implementation. In order to effectively implement those recommendations, we need to focus intently. We need to be evaluative and monitoring those things as they come out. And I look forward to seeing what that fully fleshed out plan looks like in the upcoming board meeting. I was heartened to see the presentation in the last board meeting, which included the work that needs to be done to improve our intervention and referral systems. Ensuring we have a high functioning INRS system is absolutely critical to making sure that we are adequately providing that rigorous environment where students of varying abilities can thrive, because we have teachers who feel supported and are receiving the interventions and coaching and training they need to support kids in classrooms. So strengthening our current levels, particularly those academic levels, should be the critical area of focus, and those INRS processes are the foundation upon which that is built. Scaffolded supports need to be put in place so that all of our kids have equitable access to high quality sports, both leading up to participation in honors and AP, so that all kids have the opportunity to thrive in all of our classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Shayna. Shayna, you there? One second. Let me unmute you. Is it me? Is it me again? I keep trying to unmute your mic. One sec. There you go.
Yeah, okay. So I will also be perfectly clear here that I do not support the provision given in the access and equity policy that would de-level classes at CHS. As I stated at the last Board of Ed meeting, having been through a system at CHS that was both tracked and leveled into 5 tiers, I sympathize with the intention behind this proposal. I'm glad we no longer have the old system, and that now we have academic and honors classes that look almost identical racially, yet we know outcome gaps remain, so there is something broken. The hopeful part is, as Liz mentioned, we have potential solutions from Dr. Fergus and his team, 23 recommendations, and a spotlight on the need to raise the level of rigor in academic classes. Let's focus here for at least the next 3 years. Let's provide phenomenal academic experiences for students who thankfully have the option to select these courses, but who are no less curious or capable. Let's provide academic level instruction that is not watered down, but covers all the appropriate standards taught by teachers who are encouraging and supportive to all their students. Shoring up the academic level classes will undoubtedly require a great deal of attention, examining curriculum and providing professional learning. De-leveling would require way more of a shift with high-level backwards curricular design, constant formative assessments, and a great deal of flexibility on the part of the teachers. And while we don't want to make decisions based on what's easier for adults, we would need their commitment to ensure it's done well. Otherwise, we could end up with the segregated academic groups within classrooms like the Redbirds and the Bluebirds of the olden days. But we're not there right now. We are drowning in issues that aren't being addressed. I would come in ready to tackle the oversight of Dr. Fergus's recommendations, not impose my own agenda or solutions.
Thank you for that answer. Will, you're up.
Thanks. So, it really is funny. When we filed in July, I don't think that de-leveling was on anyone's BOE bingo card at that point. So it's an interesting conversation for us to all be having right now. I think the community spoke out loudly against the board's recent proposal, especially because there was no real process listed. There was no community engagement at all. And I completely agree. I think that we have plenty on our plate. I am going to say, I have a glimmer of a sense of what folks were talking about, right? Because we have heard that our current academic level is failing kids in the high school, right? The statistic of, I think it was an Algebra 1 class, that as many as half the students in that academic level failed the class. Regardless what the solution is, that does indicate there's something broken. But the answer to this needs to be pushing rigor into where those students are. Let's make sure that we get them up to speed, as Dr. Fergus pointed out. There's been a lot of talk about heterogeneous learning. And I think it does make sense. We want to have inclusion, right? Just like we have inclusion with special education students into the mainstream classroom, we do want to make sure that students are being helped by each other. But if you have too broad a grouping, how is the teacher actually going to do that? And you wind up risking having classrooms that actually have separate groups within. And you wind up having the honors level and the academic level just sitting in that same classroom. So we've got to make sure that we are creating rigor and supporting all of our students in a way that is not creating chaos in the high school. And I don't see a plan for de-leveling right now that does that. And you'd certainly have to have a lot more buy-in from teachers, from parents, and from students for that to make any sense at all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your answers. Okay, we're going to move on to the third question. On many policies, including busing, de-leveling, and even the banning of Halloween parties, many teachers and parents have voiced frustration with the lack of transparency and communication. What would you do to improve both transparency in decision-making and engagement with stakeholders? Jeff, we're going to start with you this time.
When I was on the Board of Education, the first time, we of course were very cognizant of the need to engage the community in all our decision making. And we made decisions that not everybody liked, but I think we got it right in terms of engagement. Like, we were never accused of acting in secret on various policies. That's very different from the board in the last few years. In 2021, the board eliminated busing for kids in Marshall, Bolden, and Seth Boyd without telling anybody. There was just a whisper of it at midnight. And they completely eliminated the possibility of transfers for III kids without telling anybody. And nobody caught that until a year later. I believe I was the first person to catch it. Sometimes actually, for what the board does, it just takes common sense to know what a major policy is, to know what affects stakeholders, and to actually have the appropriate number of presentations and to have the appropriate lead time for it. And I think we got it right in the first time. For something like de-leveling or banning Halloween costumes, like, you just have to have common sense. A lot of these problems actually originate from the superintendent. It's not a systematic issue so much as like a superintendent issue, to be honest. Something I missed when I was on the board member, something I think we didn't have, is that we didn't have a good way to find out what teachers really thought of things. Like, teachers do come to public speaks and they express themselves, but they can't express themselves on every issue. And I think, like, in a negotiation with a new superintendent, I would want the board to have the ability to survey teachers. I think that would provide a lot of invaluable information. I also think that the board is doing a good thing now by doing exit interviews with teachers who are leaving our district, so we can find out actually why teachers are leaving our district and where we can improve. In short, I think some of these issues here of the last few years are superintendent issues and not systematic issues. And for some communication things that the board does, it's just common sense. You have to follow the board code of ethics, which says you have to seek input from affected people. The board did not do that in 2021, the last few years. And like, if I'm elected to the board again, like, we're going to have some good judgment on what does require input, consultation, revision, and awareness.
Thank you, Jeff. Liz, you're up.
Hey, thank you. So I would build on what Jeff said. I think one example he didn't point out in terms of communication, particularly with our teachers and administrators, was the May 11th meeting, right, where we had a number of personnel issues arrive and our entire community coming out in full force to speak out against those things. I think that's another really great example of where the communication has fallen short, not just within the district, but from the board directly. As an educator, I've held many roles in school, starting with a paraprofessional to becoming a teacher to becoming a leader and now a consultant. And these experiences have allowed me to develop a really comprehensive view of how schools run, from the classroom to working with one student to running a classroom to really driving policy across a network of schools and understanding how all of those pieces work together. Ultimately, what are the through lines of what students and teachers and parents and adults and guardians and administrators all need to feel successful in those school communities? And I can say without hesitation that the inclusion of those folks into decision-making processes, having clear communication, having support, they're all critical to ensuring that our teachers feel seen, feel heard, feel valued for the work that they do, and are congruent with that hard work that they're doing on the ground. Because I think, right, if there's one thing that we can all agree on, it's that as a community, we know that the strength of our our district is our teachers. That's an easy question. We hire them for a reason, and we should ensure that we are creating spaces to hear their invaluable insights on a very regular basis. So if elected, I would plan to move us from a place of being non-communicative or reactive in our communication to a more proactive model. And while I can't run the day-to-day, because that's not my job as a board member, my job will be oversight. And it should be oversight to catch big problems like this and make shifts. So let's shift to hosting town halls, inviting in focus groups, making room for surveys, and making sure that our teachers have opportunities to hear, have their voices heard, so that we don't lose sleep attending board meetings, because that is the only way that they can feel heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Shayna, love to hear your answer.
Sure, thank you. So I agree. I mean, communication comes up every year in these forums, and it's an area of concern year after year. I do think our new communications director is already making some strides, but we have room to grow for better communication and to engage families, specifically with more proactive communication and explanations around how certain decisions were arrived upon. And coming off of the last board meeting, what really stuck with me is the issue around communication between the district and teachers. And in our discussions with teachers over the past month or so, at various grade levels in the district, there was this theme of not feeling considered in district decisions. And teachers described times they found out about instructional or school-based changes from parents on social media. So this should not be the case. At the Board of Ed level, I would advocate for the district to have a clear pathway of communicating policy updates or additions with teachers. This would include flagging policies that are up for vote that are especially relevant to particular grade levels. If elected, I will be the voice that consistently asks, were teachers brought to the table on this, or what did teachers have to say? We need people on the board who proactively and intentionally consider how policy implementation is actually carried out in schools, and teachers should be a part of that conversation. And just in order to increase teacher retention and morale, we need to make sure that SOMSD is a place that feels like home. In Dr. Taylor's letter at the beginning of the school year, he said that this year, the district is emphasizing people over programs. We need to be sure to humanize the role of teachers and show they're truly valued as the professionals they are.
Thank you. Will, you're next.
Thank you. This is such an important issue that we talk about all the time, right? Transparency and communication. If you go back and you read coverage from Board of Education races from, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there's a constant thread of, we don't have the right communication. We're not being told about decisions. And so we can talk about it in the context of this administration, because it is very true in this administration, but it's something that we've had for a long time. This is an issue about cultures of communication, the expectation of reaching out. And that's in little pieces, right? Of letting you know, this is a change that we're seeing, and hopefully not have typos. You got to go back and issue a new memo 10 minutes later. But it's also about bringing parents and teachers into discussions. The focus group that we did not have the first year, and the surveys, the first year of the integration plan. Things like this, we have to be doing a better job of having a structured mechanism for bringing people in. I think it's more than just having common sense. It's about making new plans, because we have a lot of well-meaning folks who have come in and are still not creating the kind of invested engagement that parents want. And teachers are the backbone of our district. We can get nothing done without the teachers. And the fact that they don't have a connection to the board, I think, is a problem. There are so many levels, from the board, the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, the directors, supervisors, down to building staff. I would like to see at committee meetings, bring teachers in. Let's have a focus group right there, talk about what's going on, give us your input, have a seat at the table to a greater degree. We need to create formal structures, and I think our communication person can help with that, but this is a top-down problem that we have to create structures for.
Thank you all. Tony, you're next.
Yeah, I like what everybody had to say. Jeff, I'm going to have to re-listen to yours. I really enjoyed listening to that. Really quickly, because I feel compelled. As far as the de-leveling thing that we talked about before, that policy was brought to the board by Dr. Taylor, not as well said by the board. The board didn't bring that. A couple people co-authored it, but Dr. Taylor brought that to the board and they voted it down. Look, as far as I'm trying to figure out a way to explain to the community how it works in the school system so that your eyes don't glaze over. You have the superintendent, who is the administrative and educational leader of the district, and then there are assistant superintendents that communicate to him, and then there's middle management, if you will, of principals and content supervisors, and then there are teachers, and then there are all these staff in there as well, and then there are students. We're forgetting that. And then there are families. The leader of the district needs to communicate down and make sure that communicate filters up to him. He has to lead down, right? And then he has to lead up as well, leading to the board and communicating effectively to the board. How do we do that? Well, actually our board 2018 to 2020 oftentimes did that rather well. I'm really happy to say we had some disagreements, but we really worked on this. That's the way the committee structures work. That's the way cross committees work. So is FFT talking to policy and talking to curriculum, right? Somebody wants to buy curriculum. Have you spoken to FFT? And we have a budget conversation about that. And that's where the board can kind of guide their structure really well. But the superintendent drives this work. And so something like May 11th that we talk about, that's a symptom. That's a symptom of that. It does start with the super. The board can exacerbate it. Other people can exacerbate it, no doubt. But this is a leadership thing. And we're seeing how that's working out when the teachers came literally yelling and screaming last Wednesday.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for those answers. We're going to move on to the fourth question. Parents, teachers, and school administrators have voiced concern with major flaws in the current transportation system, one of which is chronic late arrivals to school. However, some board members and district officials claim the current transportation situation is a success and has fulfilled the community's vision. Do you agree? And if not, how would you address the issue? Liz, we're going to start with you this time.
Great. No, I don't think this has been successful. Transportation is an enormous broken window. We increased our taxes to fund this ambitious new transition plan, and we still can't manage to get kids to school on time. So no, I don't think that we could categorize that as a success at this point. And as a parent, quite frankly, listening to the stories from community members at coffees, at events, talking to folks on the street, in Board of Education meetings all school year long is frankly harrowing, right? As an educator, this is also well beyond what we typically see at the start of the school year, with some inconsistencies maybe in the first week or so. The idea of kids being late, hours late, with no real means of communicating with their families is terrifying, and I think has a real instructional and social emotional impact. And that's been noted not just by parents, but board members as well. And I want to acknowledge and applaud all of the parents who have organized to help each other out with logistics and also support each other emotionally, because this is really tricky. They've advocated for transparency and solutions. And I also applaud Mr. Bennett for his thorough analysis and advocacy in these areas. However, as board members, we can't simply arrive on day one and roll out a finished plan and assume that it will be accepted by all of our colleagues who've already been working on these issues every day. So I would never want to overpromise what I could do during the campaign and underdeliver in office. So to solve this problem as a board member, I think it really requires not just teamwork, but curiosity, not micromanage. And my intent is to approach my board colleagues to try and figure out how we can join together and figure out what happened, right? Because there's no doubt that there's steps that we can take to evaluate what happened this year, diagnose and address issues in advance of next school year, including identifying what routes look like, what are our placements look like, a plan for bus tracking application to ensure better communication, and then figuring out, honestly, how do we repair as a community? Because I think this really strikes at the heart of some of those communication and transparency issues, as well as the issue around where the rubber meets the road between our policies and our implementation process. So we have a lot of work, not just in the logistical side of the house, but also on the repair with our community from not just the district level, but also the board to community. to really, I think, not just facilitate a solution to this problem, but repair our relationships. Thank you.
That's time. And I see what you did there with the rubber hits the road. Shayna, you are up.
That was clever. Okay, to answer the first part of your question, Pete, no, I don't think it's been a success. The transportation expansion has not been a success so far this school year. And in order for the intentional integration initiative to be successful, it's essential to build community trust in operations like transportation. And our children's safety, is non-negotiable. Getting to school on time is critical. I've heard the shocking stories of parents not knowing where their children are, and it's clear buses need, at minimum, working GPS tracking and two-way communication options, so no one is left in the dark about a child's whereabouts. And I empathize with teachers who stop what they're doing to make consistently late arriving students feel welcome and get them settled into class. And as Liz pointed out, we have seen lists upon lists of ideas of how the district can reorganize the expanded transportation structure. However, as individual board members, we shouldn't micromanage district operations. So, and I say that not just because it's the rule, I say that because it's the royal road to actually breaking down district operations. It's not good governance. Board members should, on the other hand, bring their expertise in areas to provide oversight, to push our district leaders, reflect on missteps, and ask the critical questions. So once the Board of Ed starts doing the work of the administration, it ends up undermining the administrators' roles, further diminishing community confidence in district operations, which is so imperative. And we don't want to continue down the road of dysfunction. Thank you.
Thank you. Will, you're next.
Thanks. So obviously not a success. And, I think I have an idea of where Board Member Vadlamani was coming from on that. But, this is, I think, an encapsulation of what is so difficult and so important about education is, it really is no child left behind, right? We could be doing a great job for 80% of our kids. That's not success. We could be doing well for 90, 95% of our kids. That's not success. We have to be focused on each student. The last student that was not picked up on time, the last student that did not pass a class, that's the student that we have to be focused on. So no, I think what we need to do, first of all, obviously, kids had better be being picked up on time by the time we are in office in January, whoever is getting elected. And if it's not, it's a whole other level. But we need to have a thorough postmortem showing what actually happened here. We know there are issues as far as our vendor relationship, having two different levels down to get to where the actual bus company is. We're being told that we can't use disciplinary actions in the contract against a bus company because then they might not bid for our contract next year. We might be left with no bus service. I don't know the whole reality of this, but I don't like the relationship we have where we don't have communication with the bus drivers, let alone GPS tracking or any real-time feedback. I think we need to look and make sure, did we adequately fund this? We know the district came at one price tag. The town said, let's cut this and do it at a lower level. So they had a new price tag. And now we're seeing these crazy circuitous routes. I want this done right. And we have to make sure that we are managing it properly and that we have an adequate business office to actually look at it and that we've resourced it appropriately because this is crucial work. This is enabling our integration plan. It's enabling the well-functioning of our district, and we can't ignore it.
Thank you. Tony, you're next.
Yeah, I appreciate what everybody said thus far. Look, I didn't decide to run as a write-in candidate to mince words, so you'll have to apologize for me, being so pointed. But of course, it's not a success, and I've been very disappointed at how tone deaf it's been to, really say things like that and not apologize for, what has happened. These are our youngest citizens, these young human beings that are being deeply affected by this. And I think we need to be honest with the community how we got here. This administration has a clear and extensive record. It started with COVID, of choosing the quickest and easiest solution to serious multi-layered problems instead of doing the very hard work necessary for successful implementation. And I don't think I'd be able to say that so easily if it wasn't applicable to everything that we're talking about this evening, right? I mean, complicated issues require really thoughtful and strategic solutions. And you'll hear me say that often. Look, as far as Jeff Bennett is concerned, because I'm not sure if the micromanaging comment was insinuating that somebody like Jeff, who has really been a hero for the people in this transportation regard, who has done so much unbelievably thoughtful work in showing not only how he thinks about these as possible solutions, but actually showing us how we should expect the administration to have the same rigor of evaluating these bus routes at the same time. That is crucial to have as a board member. I don't see it as micromanaging. Jeff is not, I don't think, interviewing to be the transportation manager, but seeing how he thinks has opened up my eyes and expecting how administration should think. And I don't see that happening. So anyway, I would urge you to read our platform and Jeff's thoughts on transportation, which I completely agree with. And he's been wonderful to work with in this regard. We could all learn a lot from him.
Well, we're about to, because he is next to talk. Jeff, what is your response to this question?
So this issue has directly affected me. I was one of the, quote, just 90 families last year to lose busing. And my bus this year is also chronically late. And I'm definitely engaged for this for everybody. But the problem with late buses is a major, major problem. But it's not the only problem we have. And the board has to think of everything. Like, there are some kids who are on a bus for literally an hour a day. And for kids going up to South Mountain, it often means being picked up at 7 a.m. To me, that's not fair. There are other kids who have a distant placement for their school, and they're just below the cutoff, 1.25 miles. And they might be able to ride a bus if those are seats on the bus. We should have a process for giving buses to them. There are a lot of families here who might be eligible for a bus, but they can't use it because of their work schedule. We need to think of things for them as well. There are middle schoolers or 1.9 something miles from their school, and they're not getting any help from us, and I want us to help them too. I have done a lot of research and analysis on this. Something I'm proud of is that I looked at the distance and placement data from a neighborhood by neighborhood point of view, which Michael Owls had not done. So I could see actually which sections of town were the most likely to have kids going to their nearest school, and which sections of town were the least likely. The kids who live closest to Boyden only have a 31% chance of being assigned there. And that's something we have to look at too. We could actually raise that percentage by having another kindergarten at Boyden. And I can't require that, but it's something I would advocate for as a board member, because that's a major equity problem. The other ticket has blamed just the bus companies for getting kids late. It's not just the bus companies. It's not the bus companies' fault that we have a very inefficient distribution of students. There are some students who are isolated placements, maybe only a handful of kids per grade, but they don't live within a half a mile of other kids going to the same school. And buses have to take long, circuitous routes to pick them up. As a consequence, like kids who live right by Marshall are on the same bus as kids who live in like Western Maplewood, and it's all going to Clinton. These are very long buses because of the very inefficient distribution of students. I think if we had the transportation department and the placement people work together to look for isolated placements, we could actually help the problem. And we could also help by hardship transfers and waitlist transfers.
Thank you, Jeff.
Fewer kids to bus.
Thanks, everyone, for those answers. We're going to move on to the fifth and final question. The district currently has as many as 15 vacancies for special education teachers, compared to an average of 3 vacancies in surrounding districts. Parents and teachers agree that lack of resources and other problems, such as reliance on paraprofessionals, has resulted in a crisis for our special education program. How would you improve the experiences of special education students in the district? And this time we're going to start with Shana.
Okay, so Liz, Will, and I fully support the district's goal of evaluating our special education services, including out-of-district placements and the oversight of paraprofessionals. There are a couple of components of these special services that are key interests to me. First, the data that show Black, Brown, and lower SES students being overly pushed into special education without first being offered mainstream supports. If elected, I would work to ensure that both anti-bias training and robust INRS services are prioritized and faithfully provided throughout our schools. Also, as you mentioned, Pete, we've heard a lot about this shortage of special education teachers, and we can't afford to lose any of the phenomenal special ed teachers we currently have in the district. I would advocate for highlighting the strengths of teachers by having special education instructional leaders, just like some of our current teachers also serve as ELA and math instructional leaders. They can share best practices with colleagues and be an ear for colleagues so that all students with IEPs receive excellent instruction. And that way we can also show that we value teachers' professional knowledge. I know firsthand the implications of teaching in an inclusion classroom with the maximum number of students with IEPs without a co-teacher, with a revolving door of substitute paraprofessionals, and it isn't pretty. I'm glad there's a district goal around special education services because we definitely need to do better in this area.
Thank you. Will, you're next.
Great, thank you. As an attorney that has represented families who have battled with their school district because they're not getting what they need for almost 2 decades, I have, first of all, way more to say on this than I'm going to be able to fit into 2 minutes. I'm going to encourage you, go to our website, look at our platform with regard to the numerous things we want to do to repair our broken special services. Our kids are struggling. We have kids, way too many kids who are in special education classrooms that don't have teachers. And we've heard from SOMA just last week that we're not hiring those teachers early enough. If we're coming and looking for teachers in August, we're not going to find them. We know that we need teachers and we need to hire more of them and earlier. We don't have inclusion classes in every grade in every school, which means that there are many kids who are supposed to be in an inclusion class who are being forced to actually move to a different school or decide, okay, they're just not going to accept that service this year. That needs to stop. We need to invest in the minimal additional funds for having those teachers to actually staff those classrooms to make sure that the many students that are being classified are being placed there. We also need to work to make sure that as many students right now out of district as possible could be served in-house. Parents don't want to put their child on a bus. Forget about in town, talking about 20 miles away, back and forth to school with not a single peer in the district. We need to do better at making sure that we're accommodating and helping those kids have a community in our schools. And we need to do better at supervising the folks who are placing students to make sure that they're getting appropriate placements, that different students are getting equal treatment by the child study teams, and that we have the strength of supports that students require. When parents ask for an evaluation, that they're getting it, not being given an excuse and being told, I'm sorry, you can't have the service. We have to do better.
Cool. Thank you. Tony, you're next.
Yeah, I was really happy to be invited with the candidates to a CPAC meet and greet last week, where we heard from parents and leadership of CPAC. We could hear the pain and the worry behind, their stories. And I've got to go right back to this. Everything is about leadership right now. We have massive churn in the upper administrative ranks under the superintendent, especially right now in special ed. So all of us can talk about what we would do and what we'd like to do, but without the leadership actually, there to do it, it's not going to happen. And especially in special ed, with the Individual with Disabilities in Education Act says that the paid professionals are the ones that actually can do the work, no matter what kind of experience and that you have as a Board of Ed member. That's not for the board to do. I'm not saying that we're helpless. Actually, we had a glimpse of really promising special ed work with Donna Marana when I was on the board. She knew how to cross her T's and dot her I's and make sure the INRS services were starting to churn. We sought more funds and we're really good with the funds we had. While I was chair of the FFT committee, we tracked and we saw that we were an outlier, paying like $15 or $16 million a year on out-of-district placements. And I don't blame them going everywhere else when we weren't able to, file the paperwork on time because of lack of, administrative leadership. We reduced that by millions of dollars over a few years, and it's really painful to see that going back right now. What can a board do programmatically? Creative solutions are needed, and we need to urge the superintendent to do things like partner with universities like mine and like others, like other school districts are doing. We have them calling us like crazy. Figure out ways to get dual cert and special ed people fast track to get into the district, create a pipeline of teachers into the district, and maybe even a teacher academy at the district level that wants to go into special ed. We can't sit back here and just blame the teacher shortage while everybody else is, coming up with these creative solutions. We are better than that here. So those are some of the things that I've been very, very busy advocating for when I was on the board. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Tony. Jeff.
So special education has got to be a policy priority, an information priority, personnel priority, and a budgetary priority for the BOE. There's no letting ourselves off the hook about having really good leadership, a really good superintendent, and good policies here. But a huge part of what's wrong with our inability to follow 504s and IEPs is that we do have these 15 vacancies in special education, which I saw at the BOE building at the last meeting, and I spoke about it. You can't chalk this up to a statewide issue, because I have looked on the jobs website Frontline, and I've seen that other districts have a lot fewer vacancies in special education. I think the problem is partly because we've alienated special education and general education teachers with a lot of bad policy announcements and not having a good climate here. But it's also budget. What we need to do to attract teachers, we have to start special education teachers on a higher step of the salary guide, to compete with other districts here who can pay more. As a board member, I would support using our limited discretionary revenue to enhance special education, but I would also continue the fight for fair state aid, like I was involved with in my first term. It's technical, but New Jersey state aid law is biased against districts that have a lot of residential property and high income outliers. If all districts here had the same tax rate for local fair share, we would get $3.2 million in something called equalization aid. It would be a game changer for us. If elected, something I also want to help is out of district placement. We are going to have a lot of additional classrooms in the next couple of years because of our enrollment loss and the LRFP expansion. Since we'll have a lot of space, I would like to set up programs for kids with special needs so they can be educated in town. This would be socially very good for families whose children now attend school 20 miles away. And it would be good for us budgetarily because we would save on transportation. We might even get tuition from kids who live in other districts. I do want to commend Will Meyer here. He is very knowledgeable about special education. I've enjoyed all of his public speaks in special education, and I know that he is part of the CPAC leadership, and I respect the organization very, very much, and I respect Will for being so involved with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz, you're next.
Great, thank you so much. I'm excited that we get to talk about this tonight. As an educator, my career started in special education. Getting choked up, I'm sorry. And a great deal of my time over the last almost 20 years has been working to support families and their kids in special education. So it's not just a place of professional practice for me, but one that really has a place in my heart. And hearing the accounts from our special education families over the last couple of years, because I have friends in the community who have children who have different needs in our district. And as a candidate over the last few months, starting this summer, all through to the CPAC meeting that we were most recently at, as well as last week's board meeting, hearing the state of special education in our district is really sobering. And I'm excited to have folks like myself, have folks like Will, who have deep experience in special education as potential board members. Because while we have some really incredibly strong, dedicated teachers, we need to leverage our in-house expertise. We need to leverage the folks who are really making it work in our district. And we have some incredible teachers whose names kind of come up all the time. And so creating a pathway to leadership and leveraging our in-house resources is always a place that I would start. It facilitates retention of teachers. It improves morale. And it's a really easy place to start for us. We need to ensure that we do stabilize this critical department. And I think that's why our slate put it as a top priority in our platform. It has gone through lots of different leadership turnover, and we have to prioritize hiring for those special education vacancies and ensuring that we're hiring proactively, not at the last minute. These are roles that really require a high level of expertise, a high level of dedication, and we need to be in the front of the pack in terms of hiring. I think that all teachers, not just our special education teachers, but general education teachers, specials, related arts, substitutes, we need ongoing training and understanding. How do I read and implement what's in an IEP? This is not just a document. It lives and breathes in classrooms. Teachers need ongoing training in best practices in co-teaching, in inclusion, in skill scaffolding, in how to manage and prevent interfering behavior. And this promotes the idea that kids don't just go to special education. It is not a place. If we want inclusive schools, we have to program as such. Thank you.
Thank you. And that rounds out our questions. Thank you, everyone, for all your answers. We're going to go to closing statements next. Since the Bennett Mizaki team won the coin toss before, they're going to go last. So we'll start with the Callahan, Meyer, Sackett, Gable slate. And let's go in reverse alphabetical order this time. So Shayna, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Thank you to the SOMA for Sensible Refocus on Students group for inviting us here tonight. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. One of the first things we did after announcing our candidacy on July 31st was reach out to all current Board of Ed members and ask them to meet with us. Thankfully, we've already gotten to meet with most, but this is the type of proactive collaborative spirit we will bring to the board, and that our board so desperately needs. We need to stop the infighting and we need to work together. Our district has important work to do with many layers of complexity. A well-functioning board leads to competence and trust within the community and allows the hard work to get done. I understand this won't be easy, but as a resident, parent, educator, and volunteer, I'm ready for the challenge of working together across differences for our children. A vote for Liz, Will, and me is a vote for tempered discourse and collaboration. A vote for Liz, Will, and me is a vote for moving our district forward so that all students can thrive.
Thank you. Will.
Great. Thank you so much to SOMA Sensible Refocus on Students for hosting this debate tonight. Our district is at a crucial turning point. And the superintendent is not, by the way, the only vote the board is going to have next year. For the second year in a row, we have no incumbents running for the BOE because apparently it's so bad no one can stomach another term. And Liz, Shayna, and I were the only three people who even wanted to file to run this year. Our board culture is so broken. And it's no surprise we have as many problems as we do as a result. Our superintendent has not been appropriately supervised. Our district operations are a mess. We failed to meet our BPW settlement obligations, and our special education kids have no teachers. We need a change on the board before we'll see anything decent from the district here. I'm proud to be running on a slate of intelligent, collaborative professionals who are going to reach across the aisle and find sensible solutions to move us in the right direction. We've had enough rhetoric and enough bad decisions by boards of the past. Vote for Shayna, Liz, and myself to put the district on a sound footing going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Will. Liz.
Great. So I'll start just by thanking you for hosting us tonight. It was such a great opportunity to get together with all candidates. And thank you to the audience members out there in our community who took the time to be here tonight. We know that there's no such thing as an unimportant election. We know all elections at every single level have consequences. And this election takes place at a time in our district that is critical. We are at a critical juncture grappling with and working to address systems, structures, and policies that have allowed for many students to excel, while many, particularly our Black and Brown students, do not, persistently. As we undertake the initiatives that are going to be necessary to deconstruct a system where inequity has persisted, where we remediate and reimagine our schools so they can best meet the needs of all students, there will be monumental shifts. And to that end, it's critically important that we elect board members with the educational expertise to meaningfully and candidly engage with the district through thoughtful implementation monitoring to get us to success, as well as board members who are collegial and collaborative. And my running mates, Shayna, Will, and I bring those attributes in spades. As a board member, I know it's not my role to simply bring a plan forthright, but rather to approach the board as I approach the districts that I partner with every single day as a teammate, with expertise that I've cultivated over the last 2 decades, and with a spirit of curiosity and collaboration. I feel a deep sense of service towards my community, a community that I love, towards its teachers and students. And if given the chance, I look forward to charting an improved path forward.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Tony Mazzocchi. Oh God, I'm sorry, Tony. Tony, go.
Oh man, I've heard way worse. Well, thank you, SOMA SRS, for hosting this tonight, and really thank you to the candidates, all of them, for being here. I do appreciate this, and I will end the way I started. I think we owe everybody a debt of gratitude for stepping up to run. I've done this work before. It's 3 years of our life, and it's very difficult work with all of the challenges that everybody outlined. And there are some districts that don't even have enough people running for board to fill the seats, and that is a crisis waiting to happen in the public schools. So truly, thank you. And I'm glad we were able to have this conversation. Look, yes, the board has challenges, but this isn't all about the board. I really need to focus on one of the reasons that compelled me to run. I love these schools. I love them the same way I know you do, and I love these towns. I've lived here for almost 40 years. They are a creative, energetic group of people, especially our children. And right now, we are seeing that it is a critical time. We need a leader of the district that is able to tackle all of these challenges, set forth the vision for the board, as well as for a team that they need to, again, rebuild almost from scratch here. Bring in all district stakeholders, including the teachers, the students, and the families, and take care of the many challenges that we have here. I fear that no matter who is on the board after this, that we will all be, cleaning up.
Thank you, Tony.
So anyway, I appreciate being here tonight. Sorry, Pete, I just heard. And
no, it's time. Thank you.
And thank you for having us.
Jeff, bring us home.
In these closing statements, we've heard a lot of implications that, like, Tony and I would not be collegial board members. We wouldn't be collaborative board members. But when we were on the board before, the board was very high functioning. Like, there were no major policies passed in secret. There were no policies announced at midnight and passed by a hand carry. We didn't have any board members insult the public. I certainly didn't. Tony didn't. We didn't have any ethics charges against each other. We didn't encourage our friends to have frivolous ethics charges filed against board members. So we were part of a harmonious board. And actually, I believe that my 3 opponents here would also be part of a harmonious board. So it's kind of unfair to accuse us of being somehow acrimonious on the board. I think I offer a lot to the district as a board member. I've studied the III placement pattern and transportation very, very close in the last few years. And that's why I decided to run in very late September, early October, as a write-in candidate, despite the odds against it, because I felt that a lot of solutions weren't even being considered about, making some pragmatic changes to placement. I didn't think we would have a hardship transfer process, which I think we really need for certain people who need a certain school for their job or for their child's safe walk to school. I'm here actually to advocate for things which I think that were not on the table. Thank you very much. Hope you consider us.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, everyone, for both watching and for the 5 candidates who took some time out of their campaign to come to tonight's town hall, hosted by SOMA for a sensible refocus on students. I've been Pete Paschal, been your host. I hope it was an informative debate. Thank you again to the candidates for keeping your answers on time almost entirely. Thank you. That was great. Anyway, I appreciate everyone's attention, and have a good Sunday night, everyone.
Thanks, Pete. Take care.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.